Clair-Maltby Draft Secondary Plan community meeting, and we've got a dual purpose for this next segment. We're going to be together for an hour and 15 minutes, and in that time, we're going to give you an overview of what is a very extensive package of documents that was recently released, and so we realized that it's a lot to go through. This is really the start of a review process for the current draft secondary plan, and so we want to make sure that you have a sense of what you're looking at, what's available publicly, and also that you understand how you can make your voice heard in a variety of ways as we move closer to having this secondary plan approved at council. So we do appreciate you being here. Our focus for this particular segment is not only on an overview of the secondary plan, but also very specifically on land use and parks policies. So we'll spend longer in that particular part of the plan. Perhaps you noticed as you saw the invitation to tonight that the way today has run is this is the fourth of 5 sessions, and we've been trying to do a combination of overview sessions and then specific topical ones. So earlier today, we did the same overview at about 1 o'clock this afternoon, and then at 2 o'clock, we talked about water and wastewater, and at 3 o'clock, it was environmental and stormwater management. So if those are topics of interest to you, you're going to be able to find all of the questions and answers and presentations related to those topics posted at Have Your Say Guelph. And so tonight we have this overview with our conversation around land use and parks. And then at 8 o'clock tonight, we'll be talking about mobility. Before we dive into those specific topics, I want to bring to your attention that this feedback is being collected as part of stakeholder and public input on the Clair-Maltby Secondary Plan, as well as to satisfy the requirements of the Environmental Assessment Act. Please note that this evening will be recorded, and the recording may be shared on the city's website and social media channels. Any comments or questions submitted during the event may be published or shared and will be used to reflect overall feedback and help inform policy. I also want to acknowledge before we go any further that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the Anishinaabe peoples. Guelph is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. As a city, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we live and work, and certainly as a country, particularly with the terrible news that we've heard today, and probably will continue to hear, we want to acknowledge our responsibility for our history and for the land that we will be discussing tonight and on which we gather. I want to also bring to your attention the group of people who are serving as our panelists tonight. We're grateful for their commitment to being involved in these sessions today, and for many of them over many years, because this process actually began just shy of 5 years ago. And some of these folks have been involved throughout that time. So from the city, we have Melissa Aldunata, who's the manager of policy planning and urban design. We have Stacey Laughlin, who's our senior policy planner at the city. Colleen Gammy is the infrastructure planning engineer. Madeline Gibson is a policy planner, and Andrew Sandor is our host tonight and our planning clerk and doing all things tech for us. And so thank you to the city team for all the good work that has gone not only into tonight, but into the work that led up to tonight, and it is considerable. I represent a company called Sage Solutions. We are based here in Guelph, and I do stakeholder engagement and strategy facilitation with community leaders. And Sydney Orlander is my colleague, and she's here as well, and we'll keep things moving for you. And from the consulting team, we have Elizabeth Housen. She's with MSH, and she's the planning lead for the consultant team. So we're thankful that Liz is here, and joining her is Ron Scheckenberger. Ron works for Wood Canada, and he is the MESP lead, which is the Environmental Servicing Plan for this team, and we're grateful to have them here tonight as well. In terms of what will happen over the next hour and a bit, we will have the first maybe half of it as an opportunity for that consulting team to present an overview of the draft secondary plan with specific emphasis on land use and parks. During that time, as questions come up, please do put them in the chat. That's going to be our record of what you want to talk about both tonight and ongoing. And so any questions that are tabled there will be made available with full answers on Have Your Say Guelph. Some of the kind of quick ones we can answer right in the chat. The staff are available to do that tonight. Those that have some repeated themes, we will, in the second half of this segment, be answering those out loud and then putting them onto Have Your Say Guelph. And others that maybe require a bit more detailed answer or some additional information, we may not have time to answer them specifically tonight, but those too will be posted online. So I want to make sure that you're aware of your ability to go back there and read all of the detailed answers that will be posted to all of the questions asked tonight on all of the themes we'll be discussing. In addition to that, there will be what's called a virtual town hall space there where we have opportunity for you to post your ideas and feedback on these same themes, open from now until the 8th of August. And so if you've got additional comments or you know others that would like to be involved, that is where to go to put them. In addition to that, the city is offering office hours for people who want to have more of a one-on-one conversation about specific issues of interest to you. And there will also be smaller group targeted conversations by audience as well. And so leading up to the statutory public meeting of council, which will be this fall, there are lots of opportunities to have your voice heard. So please make sure to do that. A couple of other mechanical things to use WebEx tonight. One is that when you do go to post your questions in the chat, please make sure that you post them to everyone. And the way you do that is right above where you type your question, you can set who that question goes to. And we learned the hard way earlier today that all attendees does not mean all attendees. It just means community participants and not the panelists. And so we need you to put it to everyone. Please make sure that it is set to everyone. And that way all of the panelists, including myself, will see your question as well as your other audience members tonight. The other thing is that you'll find some of the slides on the presentations tonight might be a little bit hard to read in their fully zoomed out form. We're not, most of us at least, are not good at reading tiny font on slides, but the good news is on WebEx, if you go to the left-hand side of your viewing panel, you'll see a magnifying glass looking thing that will allow you to zoom in and move around on the slides as you're looking at them. So as our speakers are drawing your attention to particular features on maps, you are welcome to zoom in and look more closely at the things to which they are referring. So lots of instructions. It's time to dive into the content tonight. So again, welcome. We have put some of the instructions that I was just mentioning into the chat. That is your place to engage tonight primarily. So please actively do that as I turn it over to Liz to get us kicked off. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. And good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending. I'm going to, first of all, touch upon how we got here and some of the key things that the secondary plan, draft secondary plan is based on, in particular the vision and guiding principles that were developed through the secondary plan process. I'm then going to give an overview of some of the highlights of the draft secondary plan with respect to land use and parks. Then I'm going to turn it over to Ron Checkenberger to talk about the draft master environmental servicing plan. And then we'll conclude by talking about where we go from here. Next slide. So in terms of the process, we started with phase 1 in April 2016. And that basically was understanding the background to this area known as Clair-Maltby, and also to develop the vision and principles. Phase 2, which was July 2017 to June 2018, involved the development of the conceptual community structure and consideration of alternatives, as well as carrying out some of the detailed technical studies to assist in developing what started phase 3 out, which was the preferred alternative. Based on that, we have proceeded to develop a draft master environmental servicing plan and secondary plan. And then going forward, we will consider all of the input that we get on those draft plans and make a recommendation to council for a final set of plans. Next slide. So this graphic basically shows the secondary plan, which is the key product coming out of all of this work. And all of the input coming from the various technical studies into that document. Next slide. This is graphically presents the vision of what we hope Clair-Maltby will be, and that gets translated into words on the next slide. And essentially what we're looking for here is an area which will be a vibrant urban village integrated with the rest of the city. It will have a natural heritage system and reflect also the need to protect the Paris Gulf moraine. And that will be the framework, the physical and ecological framework for the development of interconnected and sustainable neighborhoods following the city's environment first approach. Clair-Maltby will be primarily residential in character with a full range of housing types, which will allow for affordable and market-based housing and a variety of other uses to meet the needs of residents. In particular, there'll be a system of parks, open space, and trails interwoven through the area to provide opportunities for active and passive recreation. The guiding principles that we developed arising from that vision are summarized here. There's when you go into the draft secondary plan, you'll see there's a more explanation, but in short, they're vibrant and urban, green and resilient, healthy and sustainable, interconnected and interwoven, and balanced and livable. And it's that vision and guiding principles which we have built the draft secondary plan. It also implements previous council decisions through approval of policy directions, the preferred community structure, and the open space strategy. There's a few differences. For instance, we've introduced a multi-use overpass over Gordon, and the density for the high density mixed use is increased from 200 to 250 units per hectare. That high density, mixed use area is is entirely along Gordon Street. Next, yeah. So the policies, it's important to understand that this document, the draft secondary plan, is built on the official plan. So we're not reinventing things. We're building on the existing policies and directions in your existing official plan for the entire city. What the secondary plan policies do is provide more direction for Clair-Maltby. Clair-Maltby in particular is relying on policies related to residential development in the official plan, which, as I said, are expanded on in the secondary plan because this will be a residential area, and the natural heritage system, which is again already set out in the official plan, remains a key component of the plan and is protected. So Schedule A sets out the community's structure in general terms. You'll see, to me anyway, the first impression is that there is a strong green feature, which is your natural heritage system. So that very dark green, that's the natural heritage system that will be protected, and it's the backbone on which the plan is built. It's enhanced through a system of open space, including, in particular, you can see in the center right of the plan, or my center right, is a light green area which shows as CP, which is the community park. There are also symbols throughout for neighborhood parks and for stormwater capture areas, all of which will be part of the open space system. And you'll see in among this green area, the beigey color, which is to represent the residential development, and the circles that you see are what we call a 5-minute walk area. So each one of those circles represents a residential neighborhood, which has facilities in it, which basically are within a 5-minute walk. So your schools, your parks, all are within a 5-minute walk of in those areas that are shown as a circle. You'll also see along Gordon Street the corridor of higher density uses, which is focused in the red circle area, which is the core area of that corridor. At the south end, you'll see a green circle, which is the green gateway, not only to Clair-Maltby, but also to the city as a whole. So it will be a feature which reflects the vision for Clair-Maltby, but makes it clear that people are coming into the city of Guelph. The next slide shows that this is the land use plan, and it shows more detail, basically fleshes out what you saw in the structure plan. So in the residential areas, you can see the darker yellow, which is along the major roads. Those are areas where you'll get medium density residential. The lighter yellow will be the low density residential. You'll see in the Gordon Street corridor that there is a breakdown of the land uses. So the red, yeah, I read it as red anyway, is the mixed use development. The dark brown is the high density residential. The orange on the right hand side is mixed office / commercial. So it gives you, as I said, this map gives you a finer understanding of how the land uses will be laid out in the plan. It still shows conceptually where the parks, the schools, and the stormwater capture areas are to be located. It shows the community park again, and you'll see also some arrows, some lines with arrows on them, which are the active transportation connections. So the next slide just gives you basically what I've already said about the different kinds of land uses. And then in terms of the natural heritage system, which is this slide, it just stresses that it will be protected and that it's enhanced through the open space system, which comprises a 10-hectare community park, 8 neighborhood parks, and the moraine ribbon, which is a strip of land adjacent to the natural heritage system, which you'll see very clearly on this Schedule D. You can see the purple line, which edges the natural heritage system. That is the moraine ribbon. And there are some other, that's the main preferred location. And then there's some, and you probably can't see it very well at this scale, but there's some other green areas which are other potential moraine ribbon locations. Again, you can see the park, you can see the connections, the active transportation connections. In addition, this schedule shows in more detail what the built form will look like along the Gordon Street corridor in terms of heights. So the light blue, which is along the edge, is 4 stories, and that increases in height to a maximum of 14 stories, which is the darkest color of blue. Schedule E, which is the next schedule, gives some more direction with respect to the natural heritage system. And it also refers back to official plan schedules 4A through 4B. That allows you to look at the dark green if you go to those schedules and see the various features, significant natural areas that make up that dark green in more detail. This plan also shows you where there are ecological linkages, which are the beige color. And once again, it shows you the moraine ribbon, as well as headwater drainage features, which are the dotted purple and blue dotted lines. And finally, and again, you may have to zoom in on this. It shows potential wildlife crossings, which show as double arrows at various locations on the plan. The next set of information relates to the mobility network. The key direction here is that this mobility network is for everybody. It's not just for people driving cars. So it identifies an appropriate road network and it balances the road connectivity while limiting the number of instances of proposed road crosses the natural heritage system. But those roads are for all modes of transportation. They're what are called designed to be complete streets. So you've got places for people to walk, people to bike, or similar forms of transportation, as well as for cars. And most importantly, buses, when we hopefully can all get back on the buses once COVID gets beaten to the ground. This plan, Schedule C, shows you actually, I'll start right with in the center of the plan. There you'll see the circle right on, the yellow circle on Gordon Street. That is the proposed multi-use overpass, and it's part of the essential active transportation routes. So there's an essential active east-west transportation route and one north-south. There are also a number of other connections, which you're seeing again, and you've seen on the previous maps, but these two routes are the ones that are absolutely essential to make sure that people can travel through this area using active transportation means from east to west and north to south. You'll see also the Green Gateway, as I mentioned previously on here, and the road system, which is a mix of collector and arterial roads. The next slides show some proposed potential cross sections for the different kinds of roads. We had a question in one of the earlier sessions about how firm these were, and these are just suggestions, and they're not aligned with any particular road. They're just things or cross sections which are for people's consideration as to how these roads could work for all forms of transportation. So this is the arterial roadway, collector road, and the local road cross section. I would note too that developing a cross section as a general guide is is something that will come out in the more detailed planning, but there's also a very clear recognition that those will have to be adjusted to reflect the topography and the natural features. So a particular cross section may be developed, but if the road is going through an area which is in the natural heritage system, then it will be the cross section will be adjusted to reflect the context. The other key factor that has to be taken into account in any development in this area is the conservation of cultural heritage resources. There are significant resources in this area. They reflect the rural agricultural heritage of Guelph and the former township of Puslinch, as well as the cultural heritage landscape at 2162 Gordon Street. This is illustrated, these features are illustrated on the schedule that you're seeing in front of you. And you can see in particular the black line which outlines the cultural heritage landscape. So that gives you the overview of the secondary plan. And Ron is now going to provide an overview of the MESP.
Thanks very much, Liz. Again, my name is Ron Scheckenberger. I'm with Wood Canada, and I'm going to provide you with a bit of an overview of the Master Environmental Servicing Plan. So first off, the plan has been following the guidance through the province and the Municipal Engineers Association through what's referred to as a class environmental assessment process. And the rather small graphic at the bottom of this slide shows that process that basically has multiple stages going from problem definition to evaluation of alternatives, and then moving forward through implementation and monitoring. And the master planning process is one that's basically solving the problem of how best to service these lands being proposed as an urban land use. And through that process, all the different services are evaluated and through a systematic approach. And then the documentation ultimately is intended to be transparent and provide a full range of alternatives. So that's been the process that's been followed. And we're going to be satisfying the first two phases of this process through the Clair-Maltby work. Next slide. So the preferred servicing strategies are really working around the four primary services that we're talking about. So potable water, wastewater, stormwater management, and mobility, which is basically transportation. And all of these services are related to what ultimately is the preferred land use plan. And over the course of the process, previous stages of the evaluation has considered different land uses, but we've been providing input to that, and over the course of time that's been refined, and ultimately the MESP reflects the final land use plan preferred. Thank you. So here's some graphics that we have basically depicting the different orientation of the servicing, and there's various analytical tools and evaluations that reside behind these, but what we're providing you is the ultimate recommendations. So from a water servicing standpoint, we basically have a new water tower in the southwest quadrant on a height of land, and various areas were evaluated as to where that storage would need to be provided. And the system is connected to the existing network in a different pressure zone. And you can see that connection to the north and the west. And then throughout the balance of the development area, there's a series of looping infrastructure of water mains that basically provides both potable water and fire protection flows. Next slide. Wastewater on a similar basis. So what we have in the context of the wastewater system is basically evaluating how best to get this to the sewage treatment plant. And there's various different routes that have been evaluated, and you can see the one extending beyond the Clair-Maltby area to the north and then to the west, following along what's referred to as the Hanlon route. However, internally, there's various wastewater sanitary sewers that, because of the hummocky nature of the landscape and the topography, there's quite a few low points. So the plan has ultimately been recommended to be serviced by pumping stations. Those are those red triangles. And then from those pumping stations, there's what's referred to as force mains, which is pumping the sanitary flow at pressure to a gravity main. And then that gravity main carries on to the north and the west. And it's an interesting observation, but this servicing approach limits the amount of alteration to the hummocky terrain and allows for preservation of much of the topography. Next slide. From a stormwater management standpoint, what we're looking at is a little bit different in that we're not necessarily connecting directly to a city system. In this case, you're looking more at the natural functionality, and you have to deal with the criteria and the constraints that have been established through a predecessor study to the MESP, which has been referred to as the Comprehensive Environmental Impact Study, which has been a detailed evaluation of the natural features in the area, their functions, and that has been used to then guide water management, both surface water and groundwater. Next slide. So there's a series of stormwater management components. However, the ultimate recommendation is for what's referred to as distributed low impact development best management practices, which basically is addressing the influence of stormwater at its source and looking at the source both from the roadways, which is the public realm, and the building lots, which is the private realm. So looking at having these source control measures like rain gardens and pervious pavers and bioswales and different features of that nature at the source. And then what's not captured, because that's really dealing with sort of the annual storm, which is kind of a 20 millimeter storm. So anything greater than that still needs to be managed. And we're looking at these surface water capture areas that are really sized to a large standard. It's the Hurricane Hazel standard, which exceeds the 100-year storm. And even if these areas are exceeded, there's a relief to existing depression areas in the adjacent system. Next slide. So the infiltration that's happening at source, that is intended to really continue to serve the groundwater from a quantity standpoint. However, it's still very important to prevent any contamination. So there needs to be pre-treatment, and that pre-treatment is really executed through what's referred to as a treatment train. So multi-pronged approach, looking at swales, looking at grit collectors, filtering systems to really preserve that ultimate groundwater quality that we desire. Next slide. Now, this very busy map really shows all of the different micro drainage that's happening within the area. And as pointed out earlier, it's a very hummocky landscape. It has numerous depressions. So the siting of these stormwater capture areas has been very carefully planned around the existing depressions, because these are the ones that have a functional connection to the environmental features within the network. So it's been important to plan those using the feedback from the earlier CEIS study. Next slide. So from a mobility standpoint, as Liz has pointed out earlier, you're looking at active transportation, which is looking at all the multiple modes of transportation from a human scale to a vehicular scale. And then looking at the system that really includes those roads, biking, sidewalks, et cetera. So and with consideration of all skill levels of all users. Next slide. So the ultimate plan includes collector roads, intersection improvements at 9 locations, and then the widening of Clair and Gordon, both to 4 lanes, and Victoria Road South and Maltby would be urbanized. And the reference to urbanized means that the road is going from what is a rural cross section with ditches to one that would have curb and gutter, which would then be more formalized in an urban condition.
Thanks, Ron. So in terms of where we're going from here, the city will continue to receive stakeholder input over the summer and into the early fall. There will be a statutory public meeting, which is a council meeting held in accordance with the Planning Act. Throughout this process, the city and the consultant team will be reviewing and considering the community and stakeholder feedback, and we will take that information and prepare a final secondary plan and MESP for adoption by council. That concludes our overview. Thank you very much, and we're happy to entertain any questions.
Thanks very much, Liz and Ron. Appreciate your contributions there and the good, solid detail that has gone behind them. I must admit my previous work on Clair-Maltby was the first time I had heard the word hummocky, and I have heard it 3 times tonight. I have not heard it since. So if anyone has any other questions other than how do you spell hummocky, we would welcome hearing them. Want to thank those of you who have put questions in the chat and those of you who have answered. If some of you perhaps joined us a little bit late and missed the instructions, we are taking your questions in, thank you, Morgan. We are taking your questions in the chat tonight so that we have a record of them and can make sure we answer them in careful detail on the Have Your Say Guelph site. But we also have an opportunity tonight to discuss some of them. So my understanding is that questions asked thus far have all been answered in the chat, and I'm wondering if anybody else has anything more to say. Also want to put that out to the panelists, want to make sure, because this section was both the overview and the land use and parks piece, if there's anything further that anyone wants to, I'm not sure, Liz, if you were going to say any more about the land use and parks or whether that was fully covered to the extent you wanted to in the overview, but we do have some time for any additional questions or comments at the moment. Anybody have anything else?
I don't know whether Stacy has anything more that she wants to say about the parks or the Moraine Ribbon.
I think you've covered it pretty well, Liz. I know one of the questions this afternoon is sort of trying to better understand what the Moraine Ribbon is. Is it a park? So I think I explained earlier that we anticipate that parts of that Moraine Ribbon will be acquired as parkland as part of our open space system. And that parts of it will be part of the stormwater capture areas, where the main purpose of that land is, of course, to provide that stormwater function, but could also facilitate the moraine ribbon or a trail around the edge. It may also sort of go through the edges of neighborhood parks. So the moraine ribbon will sort of be something that changes as it moves throughout the secondary plan area, and it'll be adapted to the area that it's in, so that, you know, that design piece that's going to really respond to the context that it's in, similar to sort of what Liz explained about the roads and the general cross sections that we've developed. It's a guide, but we know with some of the challenges in this area that through detailed design we'll have to be flexible to sort of respond to the context of where they're being located. So
thanks, Stacey. Morgan, I see your question about Heritage Guelph's involvement, and I'll draw your attention. Earlier in the chat, it was mentioned that the project was presented to Heritage Guelph, including when the Cultural Heritage Resource Assessment was done. So if you want to link to that Cultural Heritage Resource Assessment, Stacey's put that in the chat. I'm not sure if that fully answers your question or not, but I just wanted to make sure that draws your attention to it. Thank you for it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think back, Rebecca. I know that we presented to Heritage Guelph when we were developing the terms of reference for the project. I know that we presented to them before the preferred community structure was chosen. And I know Stephen did take the Cultural Heritage Resource Assessment to them as well. Stephen Robinson is our heritage planner. So I know we've been quite a few times, and we do plan on taking the draft secondary plan to them as well. So we certainly would like Heritage Guelph to be involved.
Thank you for that. I can see a question in the chat at the moment about how many developers had input into the plan. Did you want to speak to the fact to how the various stakeholder groups have been involved in the process up to now, Stacey?
Sure. Yeah, there certainly have been developers that have been involved in the project. They've attended the public sessions, just like members of the public. But for this project, we consider that anybody that is interested in the project is a stakeholder. So we've taken input from community members, certainly from developers, certainly we have a community working group and a technical advisory group. So we've had input from lots of different places. I can't give you a specific number about how many developers have participated, but some of them are landowners in the area, so they've definitely had input into the plan.
I think, Stacy, didn't you say how many people you had on the stakeholders list? Was it something like 400?
Yeah, our stakeholder list right now includes almost 400 people. So every time we send out a communication via email, it goes to almost 400 people.
As someone who does stakeholder engagement a lot, I know the challenges of doing that, not only in these times, but also about land that doesn't currently have a lot of neighborhoods built on it, because often that's the way people get the word out. And so kudos to all of you who have been involved on the stakeholder engagement side, because getting residents involved when there are very few residents in that area is tricky. So particularly doing things well in advance. And I just want to acknowledge those of you that are committed to a long-term view of our city, because it's much easier to get involved in things that are going to affect our lives in the immediate future. And so this is a long-term piece of work, and I am grateful for the people that are thinking on behalf of our city 2 and 3 decades out. It seems like we have answered the questions now. And so if that's the case, Stacey, with your permission, I think we'll wrap things up there. Is that okay? I'm watching for a nod. Would you like, is there anything else that you'd like to cover? Yeah. If we've covered off people's questions tonight, I want to thank you so much for coming. And what you can expect tonight, if you're interested in hearing more about the mobility side of the Clair-Maltby Draft Secondary Plans, how people will get around the area in all kinds of modes of transportation, please join us at 8 o'clock tonight. So we'll take a break between now and then, and we will reconvene at the top of the hour for 45 minutes to talk about mobility. So you're welcome to join us there. And again, please remember to go to Have Your Say Guelph, not just to read the answers to all of the questions from today, but also to add your additional questions and ideas. They're very welcome there. And you can also get in touch with folks at the city to plan other ways to have your questions answered if they haven't been already. So thank you so much for those that have attended and those that have presented tonight. We appreciate it, and have a nice evening.